A frieze block is a framing member that goes between, say, two rafters that tie those rafters together at a set distance. Now they do that because it becomes a structural part of the roof. You put a rafter or a truss down, you put a block up to it, and then you slide your next rafter or truss to that. These frieze blocks generally are pre-cut. They come with a truss package. The frieze block acts as well, first of all, it blocks anything from coming up between your rafters, say birds or bees or whatever. But more than that, what it does is it gives you an end point of your roof. So when you have your eave roofing material, like in this situation we have V-rustic siding, that type of siding is what you're going to see as you come down through your eave. The frieze block acts as a break point between the roof plywood and that nicer eave plywood. Back to frieze blocking. So I put my square here. I just make a square line on my truss here, on my top chord of the truss. Now that keeps the block nice and square with the truss, the top rail of the truss. We don't want the block like this unless specifically you want it for a reason like that. In that case, you probably have to rip the top of the block at this angle so you could still nail your plywood and your eave material onto it. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to keep our blocks square to the top rail and the back side of the block flush with the outside of the wall. So my block is going to go right there. Now I want to make sure that my block, the top of my block, is the same as the top of the top rail. I don't want to put my block down low like this, because then when I go to nail my plywood in, I'm going to have this hole where the plywood is. With the roof, you're concerned about the roof. You're not concerned about anything else other than what's happening on the roof. So these blocks are part of the roof. That's what we're concerned about. Anything that you do to this area, you want to deal with the top, not the bottom of anything, always the top. So since I know where I'm going to put my block, I'll make a mark on this side so you can see it a little easier. My block will be right here, 1.5 inches. So this is where my block will be on the other side. So I'll start my nails. That's really not a good nail. I think I'll take this one. Okay, so I just hold my finger over the top of the block like that. Hold my block right on the back side of that line. And I just give quick nailing to my block. Tap it a few times. So, now I have blocks on both sides and on the top. So now I can come along with my next truss, slide them right up against these blocks, nail them to the plate and nail them to the block, and then we just keep repeating that process, except we'll be using those pre-cut blocks from here on out. All right, we're working on our second truss. We have our 3 blocks in, and we're using 2 people to do this. 2 people is the minimum. 1 person alone, you're going to be fighting. What we've done is we've put a little brace board in the center here for a landing point for the truss. Maybe you've noticed that this is an odd looking truss. It kind of goes up and down, and these are a little unwieldy. These are called scissor trusses, and what they do is they give you more of a cathedral ceiling aspect. So what you want to do with these trusses is make sure you have something in the center, because these tend to swing quite a bit when you're working with them. A traditional truss would have a bottom cord that goes straight across the bottom and act as a ceiling. But it's very similar to this guy right here, except it wouldn't have, well, it would have some of this work in here, but it would be very similar to this truss alone. Scissor trusses are nice because what they do is they give you a little added ceiling height. So what you want to do is you want to get the crown of the truss pointing away from your starting point. So you can tilt it up to your ridge blocks here. You don't want it the opposite, otherwise you'll be fighting it. So what we'll do is we'll just slide this over. Roughly to where we need to be. And then what I can do is I'll just stand this truss up and work it into place. Now, Mark will be on that side, and the same thing goes for these trusses. You want to make them equidistant on either plate. So Mark will tell me, oh, I need to be this way a little bit, and I can tell him where I sit.
How are you, Jack?
Mine is about a 1/4 inch over.
I'm right on. Now I'm a tape.
All right. So what Mark's going to do is he's going to put a toenail in and tighten it right up against that block. I'm going to go right up here and I'm going to nail in this top block. Now what you'll notice is the top edges of the block should be flush with the top of the truss. Again, this is your guide. Nothing above this line here, okay? We don't want this block to the very, very tip because boink, boink, our plywood will come up and it'll bump into it. So again, nothing above the plane of the truss. All right, you nailed in, Mark?
Nailed in, Jack.
I'm going to move in over here and put in my one toenail. Now, what we want to do is get out our speed squares and make our marks and make sure our blocks are where they need to be. You can pretty much visualize it. As long as the block is flush with the top chord of the truss, and the back side of the block is flush with the outside of the wall, you're where you want to be. So we'll put 2 nails in there, into the block, and once we've done that, we'll come back on the other side and put another toenail in on the back side of the truss. What you'll notice is as we're putting these up and we're putting the blocks in, don't be shy about smacking the end of the block because that'll tighten everything up. If you have things loose and you gain 1/8 of an inch along the way on every block, it doesn't take long to add up. You know, 1 inch here, 3/16 there. It all adds up. Third truss. We're doing good here. First thing I did on this truss, like I did on that truss, was nail the top block first, the ridge block. That keeps the truss from falling over or anything. The second thing I want to do, obviously, is make sure that it's in the right place. And by nailing that block up there, I haven't hindered my ability to move it back and forth. So when that side was lined up with the wall, this side was over almost, say, 3/8. So I'm just going to do about 3/16 on this side. That's half of 3/8. And I'm going to put my toenail in here. Suck this truss up against the block. Secondarily, I'm going to get my block in place. Make sure it's flush across the top. Lined up with the wall nicely. I'll march over and do it on the other side. And I'll come back on this side and put in my last toenail. Could have done that earlier, but I want to make sure that side looked very good. Then what I'll do is I'll just give it a whack. Make sure my blocks are tight, my toenails are tight, make sure everything's over where it needs to be. And just for fun, I'm going to pull off my outside here and make sure that I'm still on layout. Now my 4-foot lines up pretty darn good, so I'm not really gaining. It's good to just keep the very last thing after you put the truss in, got all the nails in, it's nailed on the block, nailed on the toenail, just give it a good whack. 1 or 2 on the block, 1 or 2 on the toenail, and that'll suck everything over nice and tight. Keep doing that and you should be able to keep marching down your trusses.
Home Improvement Camp. Have at it.